My father was a U.S. naval veteran who abhorred the Vietnam War. Probably it sounds like a senseless thing to bother with, but I'm curious to some extent as to the sincerity of the National Review, who have long been positioned to someday take a side as to whether or not to support a man who broke my sister's ribs for no apparent reason because I disagree with them about my father. Now, there's a famous movie from the 70s called Wizards, which has about it the sort of hand to hand rhetorical combat that goes on between Republicans and Democrats on the level of collegiate hazing. The good wizard keeps trying to pretty up things, and in the end, he pulls out a Luger and shoots the evil wizard. And this is the moral of the story. It's a moral of the 70s story. It's a moral of the Vietnam War story. It's a moral of all stories in domestic affairs in the United States. The man who broke my sister's ribs was particularly fond of a interballistic missile advertisement that said, in the end, it's the missile that counts. People like me, as you can see from my John Kennedy hat and Greta Thunberg shirt, are a little bit like the man in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing who says, Malcolm, Martin. We wear our sensibilities bruised on our foreheads and jerseys. If you think about it, none of us are enjoying saying, I told you so about the climate albatross. But even more to the point have been my cosmological research articles about the parochial delay in climate action because they have one foot in the beyond. They want to tell the brazier burners who support Roe versus Wade, I told you so when they go to hell. So when it comes to hand rhetoric, the parochial I told you so has already gotten the last word with Midori Goto's traipsing off with Casper. And we'll talk about who Casper is in a minute, which the National Review is laughing hard about with Noam Chomsky and the New Republic, which we'll get to. I'll make a special note to make sure that we get to Casper and the National Republic laughing hard about the outcome of Two Virgins, that war game that Ringo Starr came up with. My goal in this letter is a little bit different than to recap the achievements of the parochial opponent. Part of what I have in mind doing is making it possible for people to understand what's going on, just for their own, you know. I'm not saying I have anybody listening to me or ever will have anybody listening to me who cares about the truth. That's pretty much lost cause. But there's always the chance that I do. And I feel like I would rather be on reasonable footing with such a person so that they know they're doing the right thing and hearing out what really happened. Joe Manchin of West Virginia teamed up with a woman named Cinema for the Hardy Har Har of New Republic and National Review about two virgins because there's a snuff film syndicate that I have repeatedly called Manson Cinema. Well, they were licky chopsing me, which means spy peeping. And this was hand to hand rhetorical combat. Well, Mancine, who was Manson Cinema dude in Pittsburgh, the tri state area, who Manchin's been protecting, and the Hardy Har Har with National Review and the New Republic, was particularly pedagogical towards me as a hostage when I was a child. On the subject of Thufir Hawat, I'm out in Washington now. I was lured out here by the Robert Anton Wilson sect, working with Clint Eastwood on the West Coast to make sure nobody really gets the picture, or those who do get chased off by murderous little dogs. Thufir Hawat was what was known as a mentat, which means he only thought logically. He was a Vulcan, so to speak. And they gave him one piece of wrong data, and he came to a whole set of outcomes. That's where he put his marbles to. And what we see is the way that the West fell was by the same technique. They said that JFK's murder by Adolf Hitler in hiding with the help of Ronald Reagan was nothing. We can move on. And Charles Bronson, who was a famous wife thief, had a namesake in Dealey Plaza when Aristotle Onassis' wife did the honors with the help of a whole set of sundry implements. The conquest of the Beatles, and then they pulled a super heist by framing the issue as a parallel to FDR accepting the nomination on the day Hitler was almost killed. Meaning, Ringo Starr accepts the challenge that he issued, claiming I issued it. I mean, they attacked me blindside. That's hardly a duel. That Reagan staged his own assassination as part of a comprehensive cover up for Lenin's getaway artistry when he pulled a Houdini to pin the tail on the FDR sect of their need to commit a genocide, which was the Hardy Har Har of the New Republic and National Review. So what you see is the emergence through the environmental modification of Flame Over Africa, of people who just about have to move on. Of course, they're going to do what they're going to do. But I'm just trying to set the record straight for the Burning Brassieres about where this seems to have come from. One of the things that we know is that the left is closing ranks on the Green New Deal. I certainly want to see the Green New Deal work out. But Chomsky has finally come out with his undercover violence. And it's the sort of hand to hand rhetoric that's going to bring out the worst in the right way. You know, he talks about a pitchfork revolution, confiscating their trillions of dollars and putting it to the airplay of the people. There's ways to go about reasserting values through infiltration by democratic processes of the invisible oligarchy, the leapfrog oligarchy, that has tucked itself away through locking the producer's key on high, the Ouspensky circle, and then there's ways not to. Meanwhile, the experts in provocation are going to be calling anybody who disagrees with them worms. Just as the right wing in America calls me a worm, the right wing in Russia call the Ukrainian worms, and the Ukrainians call me a worm again. And I try to stand up for the dignity of Russians because human dignity seems to me what we all need to work on in this Green New Deal situation. Well, the pitchfork revolution had about it sexual espionage. And it's very difficult for people who study the left to comprehend. I myself flabbergasted because of the way that the man who broke my sister's ribs pushed a minuscule amount of cocaine on me, which I got rid of as soon as nobody was looking, the way I used to get rid of LSD as soon as nobody was looking, that was being pushed on me. I mean, I don't want that stuff. But very conservative Wall Street, attorney based economists laugh about their use of cocaine and stuff, but they're basically against it. They're basically for the drug war. I've never been able to laugh about any of that stuff, but it's their way of laughing at me. Come on and laugh with us. No, I don't want to laugh with you. I was tortured and drugs were horrible. So these people, however, have clarified that UW dialectic is unseemly. I've always known that. But their idea of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, which the SEIU put together with SCU, and Software Engineering Institute of Bush super beams for Israel in CMU, reflected in the glass of the Roman Catholic Church onto the Catholic workers of SEIU. And if you're in the international union with the pitchforks, you're okay. If you're outside the tent, you're just going to get pissed on. And they pissed on a lot of people, and they're continuing to piss on people. So what you see is the dialectic of synthesis, antithesis, synthesis, antithesis, antithesis. Comes out in old videos of Brezhnev hopping with glee at the sight of Chuck Connors, and Putin hopping with glee at the sight of Oliver Stone, and with, well wishes from Clint Eastwood and all the rest. Because the riflemen are going to make a barn burner and get rid of, piss on anybody who's outside the international pitchfork situation. What he was arguing was that you had this economist, conservative economist from Wall Street, was arguing that Marx was much more humane in his understanding of dialectics. He meant that foreground, background. You perform a job. In the background, you're a human being, and the money doesn't measure your human beingness. That's the dialectic that Marx was up to, not a food fighter struggle over a penny. Give me a penny, give me a penny. It was more a representation of the worker's habits of time for himself and his family. The humaneness of Herbert Agar's time for greatness, JFK, an affirmation of Kennedy. The idea that you're not a human being yet, recognized by the state when the state retards your ability to put bread and butter on the table for your family. I mean, even the National Review should comprehend that. Herbert Agar was the editor of the Southern Review. He was I mean, the spirit of capitalism in Barry Goldwater's work represented the similar ideas to JFK. They were friends. But what the hardcore of the West Coast got into their heads was that the black man is a bigot too. And cousin, I'm going to call my cousin and get you. And the cousin is the NAM veteran, Veterans Administration. The black man served nobly. and he's going to get all his cousins to promote the pilot schools for Africa, and they set up the two virgins, ethno sociology for the bigots from the sidelines come with their pitchforks at the symbol of white liberalism, the symbol of contempt, the worm, who even the Burning Brassieres want to set on fire. Now, it's important to keep in mind that gay and lesbian lines, the gay and lesbian lines, lesbians were not at the same degree of risk as gays, but the gay, I'm in no way encouraging gay consciousness again in my life. I tried that once, and it was one of the barn burners whereby the ultra right wing proved that if you try to help somebody, they'll only turn on you. But aside from the bugosity of the bigots, one of the things we see in radical dissent is the inability to comprehend what's being said. For example, I have Skinhead Divine Comedy from the Ritual Descent before me right here. Bohemia, by the way, back in the 14th century, was able to hold its own against a much larger Germany because of its intellectual um, aptitude. They had a culture that was very um, meaningful and significant. And I was deaf and out on the streets. I was up against Flint Construction and the Hardy Horror Boys of the mainstream national publications. I had virtually no money. And the Pittsburgh people were stealing from me and making up stories. I was up against Migno Wen, who was working with Oliver Stone. The list goes on and on. The Radio KKK, maniacs like Jaime Carbonell, and that little Ringo Starr. His statue is so minute as a human being that there's almost nothing you can do to redeem his persona from the baggage of his sadistic bent. I mean, he talk about a denigrating character. But Oakland Bohemia received a rude shock with the arrival of the Skinhead Army. I'm reading Skinhead Divine Comedy to you. I wrote this. Taking dissension to new tangents, death to Reagan can be seen painted on area bridges. Meanwhile, the hipsters, with characteristic difference, quip, ignore them, they're idiots. That was until the skins began to arrive at parties, tearing screen doors off the hinges, punching windows, and treating women with criminal rudeness. These guys have a Hitler-like attitude. Hey, I'm hardcore. I'm big. I can control you, and there ain't nothing nobody can do about it. Many skinheads are trying to dissociate themselves from the Nazi punks, but don't let that fool you. They can no more dissociate themselves from skinhead jingoism. Slogans like "Kill Reagan" can separate the Nazi punks from the new right. We are dealing part and parcel with a moral breakdown stemming directly from the Reagan Revolution. In other words, I was protesting on this shit about "Kill Reagan," and yet I was attributing this connection, the insurrection mentality, to his planning the flames. With 45% of our tax budget going to military purposes, this is a culture of strength worship, which is why these skinhead losers can get away without disciplinary action. The muscle is holding the mind. This was back in the 80s. Hostage in Oakland, Bohemia. The very limited appeal of skinhead fashion tends to make the movement into a circus rather than a serious abomination, but it is this attitude of ignore them which troubles most. Many fanatics are given too much attention by the press, which in turn increases their power. Just a warning to any press report on neo-Nazis or other freak shows in politics. Nevertheless, one band suggests that each young humans not only refuse to take their own lives as valuable, but also seem interested in undermining other people's right to take themselves seriously. Lately, I have seen far too many bloody noses at parties to continue enjoying the joke. The blood on the wall, the blood on the grass, the threats, the broken glass, the mutilated bicycle all suggest to me that more, not less, trouble is ahead for the Oakland Bohemia, where once a good scene did dwell. keep in mind, one of the people who I enjoyed as a peer at this time was M. Christian Robinson, who took his own life and was derided by the Pittsburgh scene. That nobody had anything good to say about him. So I wrote a poem called The Interrogator about him. He was a problematic person from the streets of Pittsburgh. The Ignore Them crowd has an alliance with the We'll Handle It Ourselves crowd, and the twain have yet to suggest a more plausible solution than deal with it when we have to. I went downtown to talk to Shulman's partner, Mike McGuff, about it. He just waved me off. I said the skinheads were the shock troops of the right wing. Generally, the attitude of the public tends to reinforce the attitude that nothing can be done. Nancy Reagan has launched this absurdly inflated, but I must say admirable, against the evils of marijuana, the just say no thing, and a shadow boxing match against the stereotypes of our own imagination. Factually, the drug problem is the result of young people who like getting high and don't believe marijuana threatens them more than, say, nuclear energy, and grossly exaggerate punishments on the law record books which discourage any effort to confront the problem within the context of the system. In other words, it's not so bad that you should go to prison. I mean, there should be, people should explain that it blindfolds you from responsibilities and makes you an outcast to yourself. Actually, the new right attitude is one which increases the drug problem by making young people even more suspicious and sets them more prone to ignore the advice. In turn, this distrust leads to paralysis against the phenomenon of skinhead neo-Nazi punks bashing windows and beer blasts. Now, if you read what I'm driving at is that Reagan should put on his thinking cap about this AIDS business. At the time, I had no intention of framing him. Ming Wen was framing him, me as framing him at the time. When the system offers no recourse, the intellectuals enjoy the rapture of a poetic anarchy. The ignorant indulge themselves in a few extra rude remarks, and naive go to sleep and hope they wake up somewhere else. Well, I can't wake up anywhere else. I've been uh, horrifically poisoned and tortured by the people who I was trying to stop from disgracing the University of Pittsburgh. The University of Pittsburgh closed ranks to say, Jimmy Creary, we will never protect ourselves from disgrace. Repeat, never protect ourselves from disgrace. Which is why when John Schulman was busted and the Fernhollow Bridge fell, conceded that they had won the hand-to-hand rhetorical fight over the nature of reality. But ultimately, this comes down to the pretzel of Michael Reagan. Hitler's forces, which include Ronald Reagan, I now know and did not know at that time. Hitler's forces wanted revenge on everything American, every single detail. They looked at everything. It wasn't just Pennsylvania German saying, Jimmy gets it while the getting's good, when I was eating a dinner when I was famished, which is what William Shirer said about Adolf Hitler. But and getting back at the motorcade, uh, the assassination of one of the occupiers during Czechoslovakia's occupation by the fascists in Dealey Plaza, and not just um, uh, those things, but what Herman has said about, oh, you misunderstood youth, it is you who have misunderstood. Because ultimately, it was my misunderstanding of what had happened that blew up in my face. The idea that Michael Reagan was an American patriot, the National Review could be counted on, or that the New Republic could be counted on, that the University of Pitt could be counted on, to understand the danger of an insurrection mob from the Hitlerian right wing. There's more to this.